It's been 4 years since Corepunk was first revealed. The seamless open-world MMORPG captured our attention with its fantasy themes, isometric perspective, and lofty promise of immersive exploring, crafting, combat, and world building. For the first time since the game was announced, we got the chance to go hands-on, and my god, we're in trouble. So for context, this hands-on preview is technically a closed alpha. Players got the invite to check out the early parts of the game, from the character creation up and through some questing in the first region. Long story short, a lot of what makes an MMORPG so great right from the jump isn't there. From the moment you start questing, you're met with some of the cringiest and lazy writing I've ever experienced in a game, and the illusion of the world and the characters you're interacting with almost immediately fall apart. Every interaction is voiced, which, okay, that's pretty cool, but then you realize almost all of it is AI generated. It lacks all depth, color, tone, and timbre, and what you're left with is a hodgepodge of lackluster voiceovers you quickly learn to tune out or skip entirely.
Yo.
Who are you?
Hello there, they call me Nia Sundance, a Kadari escapee.
Don't waste my time.
Who are you?
I'm Maxwell Sterling. Census survivor, all-around fun guy. I teach newcomers how not to die, or at least how to die less often.
Now honestly, I think I could get over AI voice acting and bad quest writing. That's not exactly why I play these games. But once I got familiar with Corepunk's systems, or lack thereof, that's when things started to really derail. For starters, there's almost no new player guided experience. You get the first quest, and from that point on, you're pretty much on your own as you try and navigate the world at the pace of a glacier. Once you reach the first town, you'll interact with a number of NPCs, pick up some quests, and learn a bit about the crafting and gathering aspects of the game the team clearly wants to be a pillar of the experience. At this point, you're loaded up with about a dozen quests and absolutely no direction on where to go or really what to do. Most of these quests task you with finding items somewhere in the world. Where you get those items, you might be wondering? Well, no one actually knows because the game doesn't give you any clear indication other than some pretty useless quest text. Not holding the player's hand is one thing. Other games have also leaned into that design philosophy, but to completely leave your players in the dark is an entirely new level of bad development. I spent the first 3 hours in the game just trying to figure out some of the most basic quests, like collecting wheat so I could make some damn bread, which turned out to be so important to my ability to recover HP that it was a huge bottleneck less than an hour into the game. It was infuriating. It's the last thing you want to deal with as a new player. Part of the issue is that the quest log, map, and world itself don't do anything to aid the player in the experience. The quest log has almost no actual information. Nothing on the map is highlighted or marked to indicate where players should focus their efforts to complete quests. You can't place markers to track random quest givers or anything within the world, and the interactables blend right into the background elements of the game, making it almost impossible to identify key items while exploring. Once you do find those interactable resources, there are sometimes a dozen possible items that can drop out of that same node, meaning you could go hours without ever getting the items you need to progress a single quest. Not only that, but the world itself, even in this starting area, just feels so devoid of all life and interest. Enemies are sparse, and maybe that's a good thing based on the combat experience, but the lack of anything interesting to interact with outside of the first village could be an indicator of a bigger problem. I can hear you guys now asking the question, well, it seems like Corepunk is going the route of a more old school experience, right? And while that might be true, none of the systems work in harmony, and as you get more familiar with the world, you realize that none of the systems connect to one another. They're simply there to provide the most basic framework to an experience that doesn't at all feel good. When all of these issues compound, Corepunk is fully exposed, and given that it all ties back to questing, arguably the most important aspect of an MMO this early on in the game, and yeah, it's not good. Where things get even worse, and I mean the pinnacle of bad game design, is the combat. The action itself is fine enough. We're fighting bugs and rats. I don't expect things to be incredibly deep, but the fact that these intro packs of mobs will take you down to next to no health is absurd. Add on to that the fact that the game doesn't have passive health or mana regen, at least early on, and you can imagine how terrible that feels. Right now, the only way to passively regain health and mana is by sitting at a campfire or eating food. While there are campfires in town, placeable campfires are consumable items that you have to craft, but finding the crafting materials require you to travel into enemy-populated areas, and that's only if you're lucky enough to find the gathering nodes needed to get the resources. If you don't die before that, because an enemy tracked you for 3 miles due to bad leashing and balancing of the aggro system. What I'm really getting at here is that the foundational gameplay systems, the things that will power Corepunk long-term, do not work. Not in the technical sense, mind you. Things worked as far as I could tell, but from a player trying to experience the first few hours of the game, it was absolutely mind-boggling how many basic aspects of the experience just didn't connect. To make things even worse, secondary systems like gathering and crafting, which, let's be clear, have always been touted as a fundamental pillar of the Corepunk game, are about as bad as the rest of the experience. Never mind the fact that it's hard enough to find the nodes in the incredibly sparse world, but each generic node has a chance to spawn one of many different resources, making farming what you need entirely RNG. There's also no node sharing, so if someone beats you to the punch, you're out of luck. In a side-to-side comparison, it's honestly embarrassing because the crafting next to something like World of Warcraft's or New World, which aren't perfect by any stretch, but at least offer some level of secondary gameplay immersion. It's almost impossible to accurately experience the crafting system within Corepunk because the grind to farm even the most basic gathering materials is just monotonous and entirely dictated by randomness. So just to recap what we've talked about so far, in case you wanted a running list of issues: terrible cringy writing, poor AI voice acting, overtuned combat right from the start, no passive health or mana regeneration even out of combat, an unnecessary reliance on food to be able to function, no map guidance to support questing, no way to easily identify interactables in the world, a gathering and crafting system that is tedious and RNG dependent, and no new player guidance to help introduce core systems and shepherd players through the world. That's a damn concerning list, considering we're just talking about the first few hours of the game. And the last thing I want to start telling myself is that it'll get better. I think as players that are now fully immersed in the MMO genre, we shouldn't settle for games that have crap early game experiences only to convince ourselves things will get quote-unquote good once we reach the end game. Part of the allure of an MMORPG is the journey of creating a character and leveling them up. That experience shouldn't be a boring, frustrating grind. It should be an integral part of the gameplay, and at this point, all signs point towards Corepunk's early game experience being dreadful. So with that in mind, what should the game do to fix some of these issues? I don't want to just point out problems without some solutions, and while I think this list is concerning, it's not impossible to fix. First and foremost, the team needs to address the combat tuning. Players need to be able to explore the world, kill enemies, and not have to stop between each pack of low-tier mobs. This may resemble something similar to RuneScape's leveling, but it feels nowhere near as refined, making it a terrible experience, especially within the first few hours of the game. Either buff the player or nerf the enemies. Pick your poison. On top of that, the team should make sure that every interactable in the world is distinguishable at a glance. It could be a simple halo effect around the world element, or just drastically design different pieces, but having those core elements of the game currently blending into the background of the world doesn't make sense and leads to players just wandering around aimlessly, trying to find items that are probably right under their nose. It's also clear that the entire questing process needs to be looked at end to end. For starters, quest text needs to be much more clear. Players need to know what they're looking for or what they need to do and where they need to do it. None of that information is currently described. Personally, I'd also want to see some sort of area outlined on the map associated with each quest. I don't care if the game guides me directly to that item or enemy that I need, but I want some sort of general idea. MMOs are at their absolute worst when players need to use third-party apps or websites just to complete basic tasks like intro-level quests. But that's exactly the experience Corepunk is setting players up for, and it's not a good look. I was so excited to finally get my hands on Corepunk. We have been following this game since it was first announced, and even made a few videos along the way. But after spending an entire day just trying to find the good in the experience, I have to say, I am completely disappointed. After years of development, the game is still missing some of the foundational building blocks that all MMOs have, and without them, I don't think Corepunk will attract many new players, and it sure as heck won't retain them. In its current state, it's a huge swing and a miss, but if the team can collect feedback from the community after the alpha, incorporate the right changes to fix the experience, maybe, just maybe, Corepunk still has a chance. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you like our content and you want more videos in your feed about new and upcoming games, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. It is still the single best way to help channels like ours reach new audiences. If you also managed to get an invite to the Corepunk Alpha, I'd love to know your thoughts on the game. Leave us a comment down below and let the community know how your experience compared to mine. As always, my name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching and play on.